Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Tonight, we will be talking about my favorite character from Breaking Bad, Gus motherfucking Fring. Yes, the capo de tutti capi, the boss of bosses, the big boss himself, Gus Fring. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, let me tell you how Walter and Jesse first met Gus. Walter and Jesse were summoned to the El Pollo Loco chicken restaurant to work for Gus. He needed them to manufacture their meth for him because he had already heard about their meth. And I will tell you a little bit about the meth that they created. You see, when Walter met Jesse, Jesse was already manufacturing meth. Yeah, no, I didn't mention that in the other video, but yes. Well, Jesse was manufacturing his own meth, but it was crappy. And he told Jesse that he's like, hey, there's a better way to make this stuff. You have to use a chemical called methylamine. And at first, Jesse's like, no, I'm not. My product's good. It's the shit. I know it is. And Walter's like, this could be made a lot better. And so Walter creates a much more potent, much more stronger version of meth that has a blue color to it, and it has a much stronger taste. And that kind of meth is what caught the ear of Gus Fring, because he heard all about it, and he heard how much money it was making on the streets of Albuquerque. So he needs Walter and Jesse to manufacture this meth for him. And he already has a lab set up. It's under a laundromat, an industrial laundromat. Basically, it washes clothes and rags for restaurants, for his own restaurants, as a matter of fact. It's basically underground, about maybe 100 feet down. It can only be reached by elevator and then a series of stairs, and it has state-of-the-art equipment. Now, they see Gus working behind the counter, dressed in an El Pollo Loco chicken uniform, and they're thinking, okay, who is this guy? Is this a guy? Who are we supposed to meet? Well, he comes from behind the counter, and he looks at both of them, and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't use you, Walter. And he's like, why? It's because you hired a junkie. Junkies will steal, they will stab you in the back, and they're not a good fit for what I want to do, because anybody who would hire a junkie shows bad judgment, and I like people who make good judgment calls. And because you hired this guy, I'm sorry, I can't use you. Well, Walter just get mad. He's like, well, if you can't use him, then you can't use both of us. But here's the sleight of hand here. Walter later comes back and says, hey, I know he's a junkie, but we really need this job because we're manufacturing our meth ourselves. We're barely making any money. We're making a lot, but not that much. So Gus takes his offer, and he's like, okay, I will let you guys work for me on one condition, and that is you keep Jesse under control, because, hey, he is crazy. He is a junkie, and like I said, I don't trust junkies. And so Walter and Jesse work for Gus. And this was the best arrangement that they had in the whole series, because they were making millions of dollars, and they had the protection of this kingpin. Because you gotta realize, there were many layers to Gus Fring's organization. It wasn't just the restaurants. It was the distribution centers. He had ties to Mexican drug lords. These guys, it was all an interconnected network. It even went as high as a German conglomerate in which they got the methylamine from. So this is how much this whole thing tied together, and how much this racket was intertwined within these small organizations. It was a true drug empire, and they were making millions. Well, after a while, they thought they were getting short on their money, especially Jesse. Jesse was like, we're making all of this money, but so much is coming off the top that we're not making as much as we should. Well, Walter was like, no, we're making more than we ever made when we were just by ourselves. I mean, come on, this guy is paying us millions of dollars to make his meth, so we got to be grateful. Well, Walter started getting worse. You know, his cancer started getting worse, and so he was becoming uncommunicative with Gus, and so Gus couldn't communicate with him anymore. But before we get more into that, let's talk about Gus's personality, because to me, he is the true kingpin of the show. He is the man, the gangster, the mafia boss. Now, his manner is that of a businessman. He dresses like a businessman. He talks like a businessman. He has a very calm manner about him. And he reminds me of Vladimir Putin, because even when Vladimir Putin's mad, he doesn't scream or yell at people. He just talks in a very measured, level manner. And yes, there were a couple of times where Gus loses his shit, but it's deliberately. That's the thing. He got mad in the drop of a dime, but that was all just an act. And he himself did not kill anybody. I mean, he was a mafia boss. He got to the point where he could just have other people kill people for him. So there's that. I mean, Gus was the truth. I mean, he also represented the inverse of the American dream. He made his money the wrong way by selling and manufacturing meth and getting other people to do it eventually, and then creating a front for it, a legitimate front, which is the El Pollo Loco chicken restaurants, and then distributing it throughout this whole southwest area and through Mexico. So when we look at Gus Fring, we realize that this guy was the legitimate crime lord of the series. But Walter gets greedy, and Walter decides that he has to kill Gus because, well, he needs to be in charge of this empire now. And so he ends up killing him, and that is when shit starts to go downhill for Walter White. Now, we're going to get into a few other character traits before I leave this video, because he is my favorite character, so we're going to go with a few goodies. He was also very charitable. He gave millions to charity. And he was also a teetotaler. He didn't do drugs, and he didn't drink alcohol. And I think he was a lifelong bachelor, because even though you see him in his house, you don't see a wife or children there. So I think he lived by himself. And he was a very, very meticulous guy. I mean, for a completely evil drug lord, he was the one that was probably the most balanced character next to Walter White's son. I mean, this guy who had made his millions from selling drugs and from manufacturing drugs and then creating an empire out of it was probably the most decent character. And that's the biggest problem with this show, is that Gus Fring is probably the most stable, normal character. Because Walter White appeared normal, but he really wasn't normal. He had serious issues. And that is my whole summary on Gus Fring. If you like this video, subscribe below. Send me updates, make comments. Doesn't matter to me. I'll read them, and you could leave me comments. I love that. Anyway, bye. See you next time. And remember, stay fucking awesome.